Welcome to the Sustainable Packaging Podcast with Cory Connors, presented by Atlantic Packaging. I'm your host, Cory Connors, and today I am thrilled to welcome Wes Carter to the show. Today is a big day. Wes is the president of Atlantic Packaging and the founder of a New Earth project. He is also the guy who hired me here at Atlantic. And today's episode marks the relaunch of my podcast with all new graphics, new music, and with meaningful support from the entire team at Atlantic. Wes and I had a chance to talk about his background and the history of Atlantic Packaging, including the amazing story about Horace Carter, his grandfather, and his run-ins with the KKK. We also get to talk about why sustainable packaging has become the focus of Atlantic and a New Earth project. Today's guest is Mr. Wes Carter, the president of Atlantic Packaging and my new boss. I'm so excited to have you on, sir. Thank you again for joining the show and for letting me be on your team.
Thanks, Cory. It is awesome to be with you, and we are equally honored to have you as part of Atlantic and the New Earth project. It really does feel like a match made in heaven. So this is a big day. Me and you on this podcast together. This has been a long time coming.
I agree. I've been admiring you and your team for many years, and today it's huge for me. And we got our new podcast logo made by Megan Hatfield and the marketing team. Just really impressive work there. So excited to premiere that here with you. And really looking forward to learning about Atlantic Packaging and your background. I want to start with you first before we go into all of that lineage and the history. Can you tell us a little bit about you? And
Sure. I was born in Tabor City, where the company was founded, where my grandfather started the Tabor City Tribune. That's where I was born initially. But when I was 3 years old, my parents relocated to Wilmington, North Carolina. And at that time, Atlantic was a paper and a printing company. And then my dad, Rusty, acquired a company called Crown Box, which was a small packaging company in Wilmington. And this is probably in the late 70s, early 80s. And that took Atlantic from one location in Tabor City to two locations. And so I spent my youth and I grew up in Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach. And the experience of growing up on the coast with the ocean and salt water as the backdrop to my childhood certainly had a big impact on who I am today. And I'm happy to tell you the story of my grandfather. A lot of folks listening may have heard that story before, but the story of my grandfather and what he did in his early adult life, the reverberations of that, the soul and the energy of what he did is still, I believe, very present in Atlantic today and the work that we're doing. And it's deeply personal and inspiring for me. And I think about my grandfather a lot in the work that we're doing today.
yeah, well said. A lot of people don't realize that your grandfather, Horace Carter, was actually had a run-in with the KKK. And I think we should tell that story today because I think it's really important I think it speaks to where you are in your mindset and how you are continuing to fight on a different front. But I just, if you could tell us that story about him and how he used his platform to fight something that was so negative in our culture.
Actually, I'm holding his pens right now. He left these pens to me, these that he used to write with. So
Amazing.
I'll keep these close by. And actually, I've got his business card in there as well, so you can see publisher and founder of the Tabor City Tribune. But my grandfather was born in a small town right outside of Charlotte, a little town called Indy in Stanley County. I went to a one-room schoolhouse and was the first kid in the history of that school to ever go to college. He had a writing teacher that really believed in him and helped him get into the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he went to Chapel Hill with about $50 in his pocket. That was all the money he had to his name. And he went to the admissions office and said, "Hey, my name is Horace Carter, and I'm here to study, but I'm not sure I can afford to put myself through school." He used to laugh. He said the admissions guy said, "Yeah, you can afford to get your way through school, but you're going to have to work." We've seen people do it on less. So he got a job at the Daily Tar Heel, the university newspaper, and fell in love with journalism. and he worked all 4 years at the Daily Tar Heel that he was in school. And by the time he graduated, he was the editor of the Daily Tar Heel. And for a small town kid, being the editor of a major university newspaper was an inspiration for him. It was enlightening for him. I mean, he ended up being engaged with a lot of liberal thinkers of the day, and a gentleman named Frank Porter Graham became a big mentor of his, who was really influential politically in those days. And so when my grandfather graduated from North Carolina, his dream was to start his own newspaper, and he answered a classifieds ad for Columbus County, North Carolina, for a little town called Tabor City that wanted a weekly newspaper. So he went to Tabor City and he started this weekly newspaper. And initially he was just reporting on tobacco farming news and local agriculture news, and really it was just a newspaper to support his family. Like it was just a job initially. But my grandfather became aware that the Ku Klux Klan was really active in that community, and he was witnessing motorcades and cross burnings, and people getting pulled out of their house and being beaten, and just all the things you read about in the history books about the Klan. And my grandfather was this inspired, power of the pen, God and country guy, and he just said, there's no place in the United States of America for vigilante justice. He began publishing articles and writing scathing editorials condemning their activity. That was a really dangerous thing to do, because if the Klan was everywhere. I mean, they were police officers, they were restaurant owners, they went to your church, but you might not know who they are.
Right.
So he got almost constant threats against his family. They hired a hitman at one point to kill him. They threatened to burn down his house. They threatened all of his advertisers. And the part of the story that has hit me harder as I've gotten older and have my own family is what his wife and kids went through, especially his wife, because he had 3 children, my father being the middle child, and my dad was only 2 or 3 years old at the time. But for 3 or 4 years, they went to bed every night wondering if tonight was the night that their whole family got murdered in their sleep. Which,
Incredible.
that's consider what that would even be like for a week, much less 3 years. But my grandfather was really committed to this mission, and his wife supported him in a big way. And the two of them together really took on the Klan, and he never relented. Eventually, his editorials got picked up by larger newspapers and were reprinted in like the Charlotte Observer or the Raleigh News and Observer. Finally, the FBI contacted him and said, "We need your help. We want to infiltrate the Klan," which is exactly what they did. They ended up arresting over 300 Klansmen, imprisoning over 50, including the Grand Dragon, Thomas Hamilton. And that really broke their back. I mean, the Klan was never the same organization in the Southeast. And my grandfather subsequently won the Pulitzer Prize for meritorious public service,
Incredible.
1952. First weekly newspaper to ever win a Pulitzer, and he was only 32 years old at the time. So that is the inception story of Atlantic. Again, we're a lot different than a weekly newspaper today, but the values, the moral compass, the recognition that a business or really any organization should ultimately, first and foremost, be in service to the greater good. That lesson, I continue to learn. I mean, that lesson, I've learned that lesson over and over and over again throughout my life. And I hope the work that we're doing today in some ways is a reflection of that, because, my grandfather fought for civil rights during the civil rights era. And I feel like we're the same organization fighting for environmental rights, the rights of all life to be able to exist in a healthy way. We're fighting for that, in the age of massive environmental degradation. So nobody's trying to kill me, which is the biggest difference. So I'm not comparing the courage that he had to what we're doing today, but there is a synergy there that I think is worth noting.
There certainly is, and that is an incredible story, Wes. And I'm so impressed by you and your family and the fight that they've had in their lives and you've had in your life. There are certainly many people who don't agree with us, and they don't agree that focusing on the environment is an important thing and focusing on health is an important thing. We constantly get pushed back on these ideas, and which seems ridiculous, but it's very true. And
I'll make a comment there. It doesn't seem ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I mean, I marvel at it. I mean,
yeah,
like, we know that abundance in life comes from health. That is
Right.
super obvious. Now, we can debate strategies and what do we consider healthy,
Right.
but the idea that all of us should be supporting health in all of its dimensions to me is, obvious beyond, beyond debate.
I agree. And that's why I was so excited to work with you, because it makes sense to me and makes sense to us, but we need to show that effective, how we can make that effective in the future. But
Absolutely.
in addition to your role as the president of Atlantic Packaging, like you needed another job, you are now a founder of a New Earth project. Can you tell us that and how that is part of this great company?
Sure. So just to kind of link the newspaper to the Atlantic of today, a lot of people wonder how a weekly newspaper became this, large packaging company. After my grandfather won the Pulitzer, he got a lot of notoriety around the country, and he traveled and did speeches at Rotary clubs and business, events and things like that. And in those days, if you were in the newspaper business, you were also in the paper and office supply business. That kind of went hand in hand. And I actually remember that as a kid. We sold pens and pencils and staplers and stuff like that. So the second part of his career was really developing a business adjacent to the newspaper, because the textile industry from New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey was migrating to the Southeast, and all these hosiery companies were setting up shop, and they
Hmm.
needed converted paperboard, like collar strips for men's shirts and underwear and sock inserts that were all made from, die cut paperboard. And so we already had die cutters and printing presses for the newspaper. So my grandfather started selling, die cut paperboard. And pretty soon those apparel companies were like, hey, can you sell us corrugated boxes or tape or bags? And so this little packaging business grew up adjacent to the newspaper. But my grandfather used to always say, I never set out to be a business person. I'm a writer. And so when he was in his mid to late 50s, he was still a pretty young man. He threw the keys of Atlantic to my grandfather, or to my father, Rusty, who's still our CEO today. And my grandfather moved to Florida, where when I growing up in the 80s and 90s, my grandfather was considered one of the most preeminent outdoor writers in Florida. He wrote thousands of articles for Florida Sportsman and Field and Stream magazine. He also wrote probably over 25 books on freshwater fishing and the outdoors.
Wow.
I grew up with a grandfather who was a naturalist, who was a big conservationist, and that's what in the summers I would visit him in Florida, and we'd go bass fishing from dark to dark. And that's how it did. From dark to dark. As a 12-year-old, it was a lot. But anyway, so my dad was not as interested in the newspaper, but we still print it to this very day, for posterity primarily. But my dad was the one that really scaled Atlantic, and knew that we had to diversify outside of apparel and textiles, and so we began selling packaging to the food industry. He hired a gentleman named Bill Balcom, who's also still with us to this day, and he and Bill, along with a lot of other senior leaders throughout the 80s and 90s, really scaled Atlantic to a really strong regional packaging player. And then in the mid 90s, my dad made a decision that we didn't want to just be a commodities broker. And so he hired a few people to really develop a packaging equipment and automation program. We hired a bunch of technicians. And initially it was like, we want to sell high performance packaging materials. We need to sell the equipment too. And automation was beginning to become a bigger and bigger deal. So it was kind of a razor blade model. What happened over like the early 2000s, when I joined the company, because I joined in about 2000, I joined in 2001. After spending a couple of years living in Utah, working in the outdoor industry, interestingly enough, selling mountain bikes and telemark skis.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And but what we really started to focus on packaging efficiency and optimization. And so we cut our teeth at some big companies like Coca-Cola, like Shaw Industries, like Procter and Gamble, because we went from a razor blade model to really understanding how to create really efficient use of packaging through optimizing the equipment and the materials. And that really became our value proposition. And so that was the company that I was born into. Now, it wasn't for sustainability reasons initially. It was about driving out waste. But we were able to show big savings to customers above and beyond just transactional savings. And that value proposition that my dad and his leadership developed is what scaled Atlantic to be a national company, because our customers started saying, golly, what you guys are doing for us in Charlotte and Atlanta, we need you to do for us in Dallas and Chicago and Los Angeles. And I was a big part of that as well, because when we really started to become a national company, Was probably 15 years ago. I'd been working in the company for 8 or 10 years. I knew the organization, and I got really excited about us being a national company, not just to be big, but because I felt like our value proposition was the most attractive to these larger brands. And so that's kind of what got us to where we are, at least in that segment of our business. I think the other thing to articulate is we've always still had this manufacturing part of our business because we started off as a paperboard converter. And today, still 30% of our revenues are in products that we manufacture. As you've been to Tabor City and seen, we do folded cartons, we do labels, we print film, we print paper, we laminate. We have the capacity to convert over 300,000 tons of paperboard annually, which is about as large as any company that I've found in the world. So that's kind of like the baseline of where Wes Carter entered the industry and kind of began to scale.
Yep.
And so I can now tell you how that really sustainability, unless you have any questions about that piece.
It's an incredible process, and I absolutely agree with you that automation and the equipment leads right into cost savings, which leads right into sustainability. And you're exactly right. It's just that you've figured out the pathway to a more sustainable future. But that leads us right into a New Earth project. And what was the impetus for it? Why did you want to start a secondary situation there?
So I've always loved the outdoors. I mean, the outdoors have been the backdrop of my life. As I mentioned, I grew up, on the Atlantic Ocean, but I also had a grandfather and a father who were big outdoorsmen, so I grew up duck hunting and saltwater fishing and I've been a surfer my whole life. And that's one of my primary passions to this day. And I also love the mountains. I mean, when I was in high school, my buddies and I were kind of diehard snowboarders. And then I got into skiing and snowboarding and I lived out west in Park City, Utah, when I got out of college. So the outdoor industry has always been really, really important to me. But again, I didn't see how those things intersected with my work life really ever. That
Right.
wasn't really on my radar. But I was on a surfing trip 8 or 9 years ago in Southeast Asia, and the plastic pollution was just everywhere. And I was in arguably like surfer's paradise, like, most beautiful islands you ever seen. No real people around other than some indigenous folks that have been there for a very long time. And they certainly weren't creating the plastic pollution, but it was everywhere. And I remember sitting on my surfboard going, you know what? This is all coming from the supply chain that we're a part of. And it's not all
This has to
packaging that we
change.
sell, but like this problem is an illness of the supply chain. And when I got back from that trip, I really started to do a lot of research, and I recognized that a lot of the pollution and the packaging was coming from the supply chain that we were a part of. It was a lot of packaging companies and also customers and suppliers that I had deep relationships with. And I started to consider what would it look like for Atlantic to really embrace sustainability and take on this plastic pollution crisis at its root. I felt like, because I understood like the rate at which we're producing a lot of this non-sustainable packaging and how freely it's entering the marketplace, we're never going to clean it up at the rate that we're creating it. Like it's just too much volume. We need to solve it at the roots. So I became a very loud advocate for sustainability. And this is before a New Earth project really happened. But for a few years there, I just started talking a lot about it. And I also realized that like we were really well set up to do this because our value proposition was fundamentally use less. So I was like, we've got the hardest part already done. This packaging efficiency model, let's just get more mindful of the materials that we're selling,
Right.
and get really analytical about them too, and understand that like the e-commerce business is different than the automotive business. And we're going to have to be, analytical in how we determine materials and also end of life scenarios, depending on the vertical and sometimes maybe even depending on the customer. And so I presented that to our leadership and everyone, and there was general agreement. We got really serious about our internal commitments to sustainability. We began working with the Carbon Disclosure Project and working towards setting science-based targets. We started making big investments in solar to power a lot of our facilities and electrification of our vehicles. We started implementing a zero waste program. But what actually happened is, because I was pretty outspoken in the industry, a friend of mine who was a branding and marketing guy said, Wes, you're a surfer. And I swear, I've always thought that surfers, more than anybody else, should be advocates for ocean conservation. I've got a friend that I used to work with at Hurley, the surf brand back in the 90s, who's a filmmaker, and I'd like to connect you with him because I just feel like there might be something there. So my
That's
friend
great.
Darren Doan connected me with a guy named Peter King, who lives on the North Shore of Oahu. And Peter and I, it was the day after Christmas 2020. I'll never forget it. December the 26th, 2020. Peter and I was in Park City actually snow skiing with my kids. And Peter was on the North Shore, and we had a 3-hour Zoom call and hatched up this idea that I'd come to Hawaii and we would create the first ever fully sustainable surfboard shipping system that was plastic free. And we were going to work with some of the major shapers in Hawaii. And Peter had all those relationships and create a little documentary series about this as a way to show the world that, like, hey, if we can do this for surfboards, we can do it for anything. And it's just, we used to laugh. Like, we could have made a documentary series about sustainable packaging for industrial shelving, but no one would watch that. But, when you got Kelly Slater and John Florence and Carissa Moore and guys like John Pazell, like when you have like that surf community and you have the beauty of Hawaii in the backdrop, it made it really compelling. What I didn't anticipate is how much that community of professional surfers on the North Shore of Oahu would embrace this.
Yep.
And a lot of that is due to Peter King. I mean, Peter King's relationships and his reputation as just being just a damn good human. I mean, he gave me access, and within a few weeks of our conversation, I'm sitting on the back porch of Kelly Slater's house talking to him about sustainable packaging, and I'm like pinching myself, like, how did I end up here? But that's really how A New Earth Project began. It was like, let's find some really fun industries like the outdoor industry that understand environmental ethics and understand that sustainable packaging is a brand attribute. Surely, companies like that understand it. And we'll use social media and media to tell these stories, because we also recognize, and this is something I think is deeply human, that we're storytellers by our very nature. And, the story of humanity is it's a story. A story is how we pass along things from generation to generation. And I also really began to believe that if we wanted to change the world in positive ways, we were going to do it through inspiring change,
Yep.
not shaming people or companies.
Right.
We have to acknowledge the problem. We have to acknowledge that there's an issue here, but just pointing fingers, and I think that's where our world's gotten really messed up, is everyone pointing fingers at each other and nothing gets accomplished. And this was our effort to say, like, a sustainable revolution can be awesome and fun and inspiring. And that ultimately was the birth of A New Earth Project.
And it's had a real impact. And I want to encourage people listening to this to watch those YouTube videos. I think there's 8. I've watched them all. They're incredible. Also, going back to your grandfather, the editor and the dragon, that video on YouTube is awesome to watch. So if you want more on those stories, check out those videos.
Yeah, if you'll go to our YouTube channel, A New Earth Project has a YouTube channel, and The Editor and the Dragon is a 1-hour documentary that PBS did on my grandfather, and his story is narrated by Morgan Freeman, actually.
So good.
Yeah, having your life narrated by Morgan Freeman, that alone says something.
I think you've done something right. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and yes, and then there is that 8-part series called Journey to a New Earth that you can watch on our YouTube channel, or you can go to Amazon Prime and watch it as well, and see kind of that whole process of developing that surfboard shipping system that, by the way, really has scaled. I think we've got close to 100 surfboard shapers of all shapes and sizes that are using our S3 and our S3 Pro for shipping single and multi packs of surfboards. And once we really had that going, then we started working with people like Burton Snowboards, and we started working in the ski industry and the mountain biking industry and the kayaking industry. And we started working with companies that are doing outdoor gear and backpacks, and the rod and gun crowd as well. Like Bass Pro Shop, Cabela's is a really big customer of ours. We're in conversations with folks like Yeti and Sitka. But again, ultimately, the outdoor industry, we really saw as what we consider enlightened brands that would embrace this first and really help us articulate it to all these other brands of literally this revolution can be very supportive of your brand image. Like, sustainable packaging should be viewed through the lens of marketing, and also environmental ethics as an organization. And that, I will say, not just due to A New Earth Project, but a lot of factors, COVID being one of them, created all this packaging awareness and waste awareness. All these things intersecting is driving the supply chain in a way that I didn't anticipate, but is really encouraging. And one of the beautiful things about it is that ultimately the power is with the people.
Yeah.
Like people ask me a lot, like what is gonna make this shift the most efficient? What is gonna be the thing that's gonna drive it the most?
What can I do? Right.
Consumer demand. Consumer demand is gonna shift things far faster than any other single thing, more than legislation, even more than innovation. Consumers demanding healthy materials, sustainable packaging, healthy materials, healthy food, healthy everything.
Yeah.
That revolution, I believe we are in the beginning stages of, and I'm really encouraged. I'm incredibly hopeful. I mean, I really believe that we're headed in the right direction as a culture, as humanity.
I do too. I think people are fed up and it's time to vote with our wallets and say, listen, I'm going to buy this because of these reasons. And one of the reasons is that you're using the right kind of packaging.
That's right.
And I'm getting feedback like that all the time on different social media channels. Hey, this is great. We should use this because of these reasons. And it might sound counterintuitive to some people that a president of a packaging company would say, we want you to use less. And I think what you've done is created a truly loyal partnership system where our customers and partners are asking us to help them improve and make their packaging more sustainable.
Well, and like ultimately, as I mentioned early on, my goal for our organization is not profit optimization.
Right.
That's not the altar that we're worshiping at. Like just like my grandfather, I want to serve the greater good. Now, hey, if we don't have a profitable company, we can't serve anything. It all goes
Right.
away. So profit is not a bad word. It's fundamental. And we work really hard to create, programs that are profitable and run a healthy business. I mean, a healthy business is a profitable business. But again, to me, it's all about like, what are you primarily focused on? And
Yes.
so every organization can serve the greater good. And the greater good for an automotive company or for an e-commerce company may be different than a packaging company. And you can have more than one greater good, and we have many greater. One of our greater goods is the health of our employees.
Yes.
And so what we've tried to do is say, we want a profitable company, a highly profitable company, but we want that in service, to something greater than the bottom line. And to me, all organizations, all industry of the future needs to be in service to one thing, and that is life.
Yep.
We need to be in service to life. In the entire known universe, the only place that life exists, as far as we know, is right here, which at a minimum makes it radically unique. I would argue it makes it radically spiritual and radically sacred.
Totally.
And once I had that awakening, I realized that like everything needs to be in service to this. Like, why would we destroy the most unique, sacred thing in the known universe?
Mm-hmm.
That's insanity, And so this awakening for me, and the one that I hope that other people are having, and I'm seeing it happening all over the place, it's real obvious. Like once you start to pull that thread, you're like, oh, duh.
Yeah.
Duh. Yeah, of course we should be in service to life. And of course we should be in service to health.
As the new guy at Atlantic, I've been on a whirlwind tour of many of our locations, and every single place I go, they're pointing me to, oh, this is our gym, and there's always people in there working out, and just absolutely impressed by how the focus of health of employees is top of the list of our benefits.
Well, and that honestly, and I kind of skipped over that part of the story, but before a New Earth project, this has probably been 14 years ago now, I launched a health and wellness program because I had stumbled into a yoga studio when I moved to Charleston, and that practice resonated with me so much. And I started practicing yoga a lot. And the yoga community in Charleston introduced me to all kinds of people like nutritionists and body workers and energy workers. And like, I was like, wow, this is really enriching for my life. I was feeling better. I was sleeping better. I was thinking better. And I felt like, like I'm fortunate to have access to all these modalities and these people, but, not everybody is. And like, that's not fair. I want to try to bring as much of this as I can into our organization. And when we started our health and wellness program, I told the leadership, I was like, this is not about insurance premiums. This is about the culture of the company. But the success of our wellness program really was about our employees. I mean, our employees just jumped in and said, yes, we love this. And we tried to make it really fun and creative and engaging. And what ended up happening is it created incredible loyalty.
Hmm.
It showed our employees that we deeply care about the health of them and their families. And if you want a great culture at a company, the way to do that is tenure. And that's ultimately what we're investing in. We're investing in the culture of our company, in the tenure of our employees. And also, it's just common sense. Like, healthy employees, they're more creative. They work better together. They show up on time.
More energy.
They're
Yeah.
more energized. They're packed. When you're, I mean, anyone who's ever been sick, it's really hard to create when you're sick. But when you're vibrant and healthy, creativity flows,
Totally agree.
and that's what we're trying to incubate at Atlantic. So health has just become the through line. We make all of our decisions from that place, and it's not perfect, obviously, but the world isn't perfect. I'm more interested in progress.
Yes. And I see it. And it's throughout the company. It's at every level. And it's really exciting to be a part of that. So this has been incredible, Wes. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I did want to ask one more question. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and with Atlantic Packaging and a New Earth project?
Sure. Well, before I answer that, I do want to plug one more thing, Cory, if you don't
Please.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did just want to say, because I want the listeners to understand the Atlantic of today and what it looks like. We still have this deeply mature packaging efficiency model. We have a packaging solution center in Charlotte, North Carolina, that celebrates 8 years, actually just last week. And that is a fundamental part of our value proposition: highly efficient packaging, consulting services, driving out waste.
Totally impressive.
We
Yeah.
have this 30% of our revenues come from manufacturing, which today is primarily in fiber-based solutions. And we're actually vertically integrating a lot of sustainable retail packaging for the same customers that we're doing the efficiency model for. So things like you've seen Paperform and Fishbone and the Cruise Cooler, like all of our manufacturing is supporting these retail packaging options for our customers as well. And then the third leg of the stool today is New Earth Ventures, headed up by Matt Saunders, that we launched last year, where it's our first venture arm, and we're incubating technology, sustainable technology, from a portfolio of companies that are a lot of young entrepreneurs and scaling things like seaweed for plastics, or mycelium, or hemp, or other
So exciting.
fiber-based. We're working on a lot of coding. So everything we're doing at Atlantic is working to incubate and scale packaging efficiency, closed loops, and sustainable nature-based materials, all in service to life. So that is the company that I've been trying to build with the help of a tremendously talented group of people that you've come to know. My senior leadership is epic. My New Earth team is epic. It is the most amazing group of human beings that I absolutely adore. I mean,
Yeah.
it is family, and you can feel it at
I
Atlantic.
agree.
But if you want to find me, I'm really active on LinkedIn. So you can just look up Wes Carter Atlantic on LinkedIn. My Instagram handle is Wes M. Carter. You can also follow, and I encourage you to follow, A New Earth Project on Instagram. And I'm not going to give out my phone number today,
I wouldn't. No.
but yeah, Instagram and LinkedIn. If you follow those two things, that's a good place to find me. And then I do a lot of podcasts too. So look me up on your podcast. I just did one with Nate Hagens recently that a lot of people have given me good feedback on. So that one's relatively new. And now we have this one.
It's exciting to be a part of this team, and you're exactly right. Yeah, there's so many ways to get in touch with you and with the team at Atlantic Packaging and New Earth Project that there's just no more excuses. Reach out to us, and we'll help you out today. Thank you.
Yeah. And finally, I just say to anybody, brands, packaging companies, like, let's do this. We have the potential and the capabilities to do something profound for the world that our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren will all benefit from. Like, we are in a legacy moment, and I really believe packaging professionals working with consumer products companies and retail brands over the next 8 or 10 years can do something profound for the world. But it takes all of us, and we have to do this together. And it's why the New Earth Project, our tagline is, we do this together. It is a group effort, and this is all about moving the world into a better place, into a healthier place, into a more harmonious place, into a more reciprocal place with all life. So my honor to be with you, Cory. I am super stoked you're a part of this team.
Oh, thank you, Wes.
And yeah, we're gonna push the podcast and keep interviewing amazing human beings. all over the world.
Oh, I agree. And it all starts with you here. And it all starts with, it feels like we're jumping off together into this great abyss of amazing things that are going to happen. So I can't wait to tell everybody what's going on. But thanks again, Mr. Carter, for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
What a great way to kick off this next stage of my career at Atlantic Packaging. Big thanks to Wes Carter for being my first guest, to my colleagues at Atlantic, and to our sponsors, Specrite, Cruise Foam, and Fishbone. And be sure to tune in next Monday when I will welcome Sydney Munoz, the Sustainability Manager at Goodwill International, for an inspiring and enlightening conversation. That's all. I'm Cory Connors. See you next week.